Would you spend a night on a remote island with no permanent residence? Or climb a narrow mountain path to reach a shelter perched high above a cliff? How far would you travel to visit places so isolated that most people only ever see them in photographs? Today we explore some of the world's most remote and extraordinary places where people have chosen to live, work, worship, and survive. One stands alone on a tiny island in the North Atlantic, surrounded by steep cliffs, windswept grassland, and endless ocean. Another clings to a mountainside high above a Swiss valley, where narrow trails and dizzying drops separate visitors from the world below. Join us as we discover some of the most isolated and remarkable places on Earth. Nestled on a remote island in southern Iceland, this small house has earned a reputation as one of the loneliest homes on Earth. Elliday Island sits within the Vestmannaeyjar archipelago, several kilometers from Iceland's southern coast. No permanent residents live here. No roads cross the island. No towns, shops, or tourist facilities operate on its grassy slopes. A single white house stands alone between steep cliffs and the cold North Atlantic Ocean. From a distance, the building looks abandoned. Many people who first see photos of it assume someone lives there year-round. The real story is much less mysterious. Members of the Elliday Hunting Association built the house in 1953. They needed a shelter while hunting puffins on the island during certain seasons. The building never served as a permanent home. Instead, hunters used it as a temporary base before returning to the mainland. Its unusual location simply helped it spread across social media and travel websites. The image of a lone building surrounded by grass, cliffs, and ocean attracted millions of views. Life on the island remains basic. Visitors must bring most of what they need with them. Rough seas often limit access, especially during bad weather. A small number receive permission to go ashore, but local regulations tightly control access. Would you spend a night inside a mountain shelter nearly 3,000 meters above sea level, knowing that steel ladders and narrow ledges provide the only way out? Bivaco Buffa di Pereiro clings to a rocky alcove at Forcella Padion, high on the Cristallo Massif above Cortina d'Ampezzo in northern Italy. The shelter sits among steep cliffs, snow-covered slopes, and long drops that stretch far below the surrounding peaks. Reaching it requires more than a simple hike. Climbers must follow exposed mountain routes, cross narrow sections of rock, and climb steel ladders fixed directly onto the mountainside. In several places, only a small ledge separates the path from open space. The shelter gained attention because of its location. A small wooden structure appears almost hidden within the pale cliffs of the Dolomites. Photos often make it look as though someone placed a cabin in a spot where no building should exist. The shelter now serves as an emergency refuge for climbers. Nobody lives here permanently. Mountaineers use it to rest, spend the night, or wait for dangerous weather to pass before continuing their route. Most tourists never reach this location. Only experienced climbers with the necessary skills and equipment can safely approach one of the most isolated mountain shelters in the Dolomites. Deep within the rainforests of eastern Indonesia, the Korowai people became known around the world for homes that rise high above the forest floor. Some of these structures stand so high that they appear to float among the treetops, hidden above the dense jungle canopy. Reaching the Korowai communities will require long boat journeys followed by hours of walking through difficult terrain. Their tree houses represent one of the most recognizable forms of traditional architecture anywhere in the world. Builders select large trees as the main support and construct platforms high above the ground. They use materials gathered directly from the forest, including wood, rattan, vines, and palm leaves. Some houses rise more than 50 meters above the forest floor. From below, the structures can look surprisingly fragile. In reality, generations of experience helped the Korowai develop construction techniques suited to their environment. Building high above the ground offers practical advantages. Elevated homes help reduce exposure to seasonal flooding, insects, and other challenges common in lowland rainforest areas. Stories about extremely tall tree houses attracted filmmakers, researchers, and travelers for decades. Some reports suggest that a few of the tallest examples were built partly to accommodate documentary crews interested in recording Korowai culture. Anyone exploring the area should travel with experienced local guides and respect the difference between learning about a community's culture and intruding on people's daily lives. How can a small wooden house survive in the middle of a fast-moving river for more than half a century? In western Serbia, the Drina River house stands on a single rock surrounded by cold water. Large mountains rise along the riverbanks. The house looks tiny against the landscape around it. In 1968, a group of local swimmers used the rock as a place to rest after jumping into the river. They wanted a better shelter from the sun and weather. Instead of searching for one, they decided to build it themselves. The location created an unusual challenge. Workers could not drive vehicles to the rock. They transported materials by boat. In some cases, they placed supplies into the river and allowed the current to carry them closer to the construction site. Piece by piece, they assembled a small wooden house above the water. The structure quickly became a local landmark. Over time, photographers discovered it, travel magazines featured it. Images of the tiny house spread across the world and turned it into one of Serbia's most recognizable attractions. Several major floods damaged or destroyed parts of the structure over the decades. Each time, local residents repaired or rebuilt it. Their efforts allowed the house to remain in place long after many people expected it to disappear. Do you know where some of the loneliest workers on Earth once spent their lives? Many of them lived inside remote lighthouses surrounded by nothing but open sea. And one of them is the La Jument Lighthouse, located on a rocky outcrop off the coast near Ushant Island in the Brittany region of France. The lighthouse rises directly from La Jument Reef in the Iroise Sea, a stretch of water known for powerful currents, heavy storms, and some of the roughest conditions along the French coast. The need for the lighthouse came from tragedy. In 1896, the passenger ship SS Drummond Castle struck rocks near the area and sank. Around 250 people lost their lives. The disaster highlighted the dangers of local waters and strengthened calls for a permanent warning system. For decades, lighthouse keepers lived and worked inside La Jumente. Storms regularly battered the tower. During severe weather, enormous waves crashed against the walls and windows. The surrounding sea often left little margin for error. The lighthouse gained worldwide attention in 1989 thanks to a dramatic photograph taken by French photographer Jean Guichard. During a powerful storm, keeper Theodore Malgorn opened the door after hearing a helicopter overhead. At that exact moment, a massive wave surged toward the lighthouse. Guichard captured the scene just seconds before the water struck the tower. Malgorn quickly stepped back inside and escaped unharmed. Automation replaced resident lighthouse keepers in 1991, but the tower still stands as a symbol of life at the edge of the sea. What would it feel like to stand on a wooden house built directly into a cliff, with nothing but open space in front of you and solid rock pressing behind? Berggasthaus Escher sits in the Alpstein Mountains of eastern Switzerland, attached directly to a limestone cliff at an altitude of about 1,454 meters above sea level. The structure looks as if it was carved into the rock face, suspended between a mountain wall and open valley. The guest house has existed since 1846, making it one of the oldest mountain inns in Switzerland. Access to the building involves narrow mountain paths that cut across cliffs and pass through small caves. Some sections run directly along exposed rock walls where a single misstep can lead to a long drop into the valley below. In Bern, the location became globally known after appearing on the cover of National Geographic in 2015 under the feature Destinations of a Lifetime. After that, visitor numbers increased sharply, turning the once quiet mountain lodge into a popular travel destination. Despite the rise in tourism, the structure itself remained largely unchanged after renovation work was completed around 2019 to 2020. The original cliffside character of the building was preserved. A cable car from Wasserauen provides the most direct access to the area, followed by a hike to reach the guest house. Today, Escher remains both a functioning restaurant and a striking example of how human structures adapt to extreme natural landscapes. Sky Lodge Adventure Suites is located in the Sacred Valley of Peru, an area defined by steep canyon walls and deep river valleys carved into the Andes. The accommodation consists of transparent sleeping capsules mounted directly onto a vertical cliff face, positioned hundreds of meters above the ground. There is no road access to the pods. Visitors must reach the site by climbing metal ladders fixed into the rock or by using a via ferrata route combined with zipline sections. The entire ascent requires safety harnesses and climbing equipment, and every section of the route is exposed to open air and steep drop-offs. Each pod is built as a compact living space with a bed, seating area, and a small bathroom unit. The walls are made of reinforced transparent material, allowing uninterrupted views of the valley and surrounding cliffs. At night, the interior becomes a closed space suspended above darkness, with only the glass separating guests from the open air. Food and supplies are transported using rope systems or carried manually by staff along the same climbing route. Operation of the site depends heavily on anchor stability, cable systems, and weather conditions in the valley. Every movement is controlled by strict safety procedures. Despite its extreme setting, Sky Lodge Adventure Suites operates as a functioning tourism facility and attracts visitors from around the world. Leaving the cliffside capsules of Peru behind, we now head to the Alps. Here, Capana Regina Margarita stands on a snow-covered summit surrounded by glaciers, strong winds, and some of the thinnest air found in Europe. At an elevation of about 4,554 meters, it ranks among the highest buildings in Europe. To get there, climbers must cross glaciers, navigate snow-covered terrain, and spend hours moving through an environment where oxygen levels are significantly lower than at sea level. Even experienced mountaineers often feel the effects of altitude during the ascent. Workers constructed the first refuge between 1889 and 1892. The building officially opened in 1893 with Queen Margherita of Savoy attending the inauguration ceremony. The refuge later took her name. Engineers eventually replaced the original structure. They dismantled the older building and completed the current version between 1979 and 1980. Today, the facility serves two purposes. It functions as a mountain refuge for climbers and also supports scientific research conducted at high altitude. Its location allows researchers to study environmental and atmospheric conditions in an extreme alpine setting. Visitors cannot simply book a room and arrive by road. Only climbers prepared for high-altitude conditions can realistically reach this isolated building at the top of the Alps. Surrounded by snowfields, rock faces, and deep glacial crevasses, Refuge des Cosmiques stands in a place where even a small mistake can have serious consequences. The refuge sits at an elevation of about 3,613 meters near Aiguille du Midi in the Mont Blanc Massif of France. Climbers use it as a base for alpine routes that cross some of the most famous high mountain terrain in Europe. The site did not begin as a mountain lodge. Researchers originally built a facility here during the 1930s to study cosmic rays at high altitude. A fire later destroyed much of the structure in 1984. Workers constructed the current refuge after the fire and officially opened it in 1991. Many climbers consider sections of the route intimidating, especially those with limited experience in high mountains. A slip on snow or ice can quickly become dangerous. Strong winds, poor visibility, and changing weather add further challenges. Unlike smaller emergency shelters, Refuge des Cosmiques accommodates a large number of visitors. The building can host up to 148 climbers during the busy season, making it one of the most important mountain refuges in the region. However, reaching a bed here still requires careful preparation. Climbers must reserve space in advance, carry appropriate equipment, and evaluate mountain conditions before setting out. On a remote island off the west coast of Scotland, a lighthouse once became the center of one of the country's most enduring mysteries. Flannan Isles Lighthouse stands on Eilean Moor, the largest island in the Flannan Isles. Few people visit the islands today, and no permanent community lives there. Its isolated location made lighthouse keepers responsible for maintaining the station in difficult weather and far from regular contact with the mainland. The lighthouse entered history in December 1900. A relief vessel arrived at the island and discovered something unusual. Three lighthouse keepers had disappeared. No sign of a struggle appeared inside the station. No bodies were found. The men simply vanished, leaving behind a mystery that remains unsolved more than a century later. Investigators examined the site and proposed several explanations. One theory suggested that an unusually powerful wave struck the coastline and swept the men into the sea while they worked near the landing area. The harsh Atlantic environment made such accidents possible. The unexplained case inspired books, poems, songs, documentaries, and films. More than 100 years later, people still debate what happened to the three keepers on that isolated island. Today, Flannan Isles Lighthouse remains a symbol of both maritime history and one of Britain's most famous unsolved disappearances. Perched Castle holds a unique place on this list. It is widely recognized as the world's largest cave castle and combines natural geology with centuries of military history. The castle stands in southwestern Slovenia near the town of Postojna. Builders constructed it within the entrance of a massive limestone cave, high on a cliff that rises about 123 meters above the valley floor. This location offered major defensive advantages. Anyone approaching the castle had to face the narrow entrance from the front, while the rock walls protected the structure from several directions. Behind the castle, a network of caves and natural tunnels extended deep into the mountain. The site's most famous story centers on Arazem of Prejama, a 15th century knight and nobleman who controlled the fortress. According to local accounts, enemy forces surrounded the castle and attempted to starve him into surrender. Arazem reportedly avoided defeat by using hidden passages that connected the castle to the cave system behind it. supporters could secretly deliver food and supplies while the siege continued outside. Today, visitors explore furnished rooms, defensive chambers, and sections of the cave network behind the castle. Exhibits explain medieval life, military strategy, and the history of the region. Between the islands of Ushant and Molen, a solitary tower rises from a rocky outcrop surrounded by some of the strongest currents in western France. Carillon Lighthouse stands on Mentencel Rock in the Iroise Sea, directly within the Fromvere Passage. Ships passing through this area must contend with powerful tidal flows, rough seas, and rapidly changing conditions. Unlike many remote lighthouses built with simple interiors, Carillon became famous for a very different reason. Visitors often described it as one of the most luxurious sea lighthouses ever constructed. Construction began in 1907 and continued until 1916. The project relied heavily on a large donation from Amici Labodi, a French philanthropist and writer who wanted to improve navigation safety in the region. Craftsmen installed mosaic floors, oak woodwork, and decorative details rarely found in offshore navigation structures. For many years, lighthouse keepers lived and worked inside the tower. Their duties included maintaining the light while enduring long periods of isolation in one of France's most demanding maritime environments. Carillon became especially known for its dangerous crew changes. Heavy seas often prevented boats from approaching safely. In some cases, keepers had to transfer between the lighthouse and supply vessels using ropes suspended above the water. Do you think a mountain shelter can look more like a spacecraft than a cabin? High in the Alps, one refuge arrived by helicopter and now sits above glaciers and rock walls. Bivacco Gervasuti stands in Val Ferret near Courmayeur on the Italian side of the Mont Blanc Massif. The shelter overlooks the Freibudza Glacier at an elevation of about 2,835 meters. Unlike traditional mountain huts built from stone and timber, this structure has a modern design. Its compact metallic body resembles a small capsule attached to the mountainside. Engineers designed the refuge specifically for mountaineers traveling through a demanding alpine environment. Because the location offers little room for conventional construction, crews transported major sections of the shelter by helicopter before installing them on site. Its position remains one of its most striking features. Ice fields, steep rock faces, and changing mountain weather surround the shelter in every direction. Outdoor media often describe Bivacco Gervasuti as a symbol of modern alpine refuge design. Reaching the shelter requires a challenging mountain approach. Ordinary tourists rarely visit the site because the route demands climbing experience, physical fitness, and familiarity with alpine conditions. Not a mountain lodge or a hotel in a remote location, Concordia was a manned research station located deep within Antarctica. No trees grow here. No towns exist nearby. Very little breaks the white landscape surrounding the station. From a distance, the station's two main towers appear surprisingly small against the vast Antarctic interior. The scale of the environment quickly becomes apparent to anyone arriving for the first time. Isolation defines life at Concordia. During the Antarctic winter, crews can spend months completely cut off from the outside world. Aircraft usually reach the station only during the summer season, when weather conditions allow safe flights. The people who remain here include scientists, physicians, engineers, technicians, and operational staff. Winter teams are often small. Everyone must work closely together while living in a confined environment far from conventional support systems. Long periods of darkness affect daily routines. Extreme isolation limits contact with the outside world. The high elevation of the Antarctic plateau also reduces available oxygen, adding another layer of difficulty to everyday life. Despite the demanding environment, scientists continue to work here because Antarctica provides research opportunities that few other places can match. The remote setting allows long-term observations that help improve our understanding of Earth's climate, atmosphere, and natural systems. Catskill Pillar rises abruptly from the landscape of western Georgia near the town of Chiatura, forming a natural limestone column about 40 meters high. The rock stands almost perfectly vertical, creating a structure that looks completely detached from the ground, with only a narrow base connecting it to the surrounding terrain. At the top of the pillar sits a small monastic complex, including a chapel and several basic religious structures. At the base of the pillar, a modern church and remnants of older buildings remain, marking the connection between the elevated monastery and the wider community below. Historical research suggests that the original religious presence on the pillar dates back to around the 9th or 10th century. For centuries, the top remained largely inaccessible. In July 1944, a documented ascent was completed by a team led by mountaineer Alexander Japaridze and writer Levan Gotua. Life on top of the pillar is extremely limited in space and resources. Monastic residents spend long periods in isolation, with daily routines centered on prayer and religious discipline. Some accounts describe extended prayer sessions lasting several hours each day, including early morning rituals before sunrise. Images of the structure perched on a vertical rock column have made it widely recognizable in discussions of remote religious sites. Bishop Rock Lighthouse rises from a single granite outcrop at the far edge of the Isles of Scilly, where the Atlantic Ocean meets the southwest coast of England. The rock itself is barely visible at high tide, leaving the lighthouse surrounded entirely by open water and shifting sea conditions. The location is directly exposed to Atlantic storms, where waves, wind, and currents collide without any natural barrier to reduce their force. Construction of the lighthouse was a long and difficult process. An earlier iron structure built on the same site was destroyed by storms before it could be completed, highlighting the severity of the environment. For decades, the lighthouse was staffed by keepers who lived in complete isolation. Their daily routine centered on maintaining the light, monitoring sea conditions, and ensuring maritime safety for ships passing through one of the most dangerous sections of the Atlantic route. Rotation depended entirely on weather windows, as landing on the rock was only possible under calm sea conditions. When storms intensified, relief missions were often delayed for days, forcing crews to remain on site longer than scheduled. During these periods, the lighthouse became fully cut off from external contact except for emergency signals and distant visual observation. Today, the Bishop Rock Lighthouse is automated, but it remains a symbol of humanity's enduring presence at sea. Did you know that every year thousands of tourists flock to this Swiss mountain and climb to an altitude of over 4,000 meters on the Matterhorn just to step inside a tiny wooden cabin? Solvay Hut sits directly on the Hernley Ridge of the Matterhorn in Switzerland, at an altitude of 4,003 meters, where the mountain narrows into exposed rock and steep alpine drop-offs on both sides. The hut was built more than a century ago, with funding from chemist Ernest Solvay, using materials transported from Hernley Hut through a cable system due to the extreme inaccessibility of the ridge. Inside, the shelter is designed for survival rather than comfort. It contains basic sleeping space for around 10 climbers, with minimal facilities and no long-term accommodation features. Access to the hut requires navigating technical alpine terrain, where climbers move along fixed ropes, exposed rock sections, and narrow ridgelines. The environment is highly dependent on weather stability, and sudden changes in wind or visibility can quickly make the route unsafe. Solvay Hut remains one of the highest emergency shelters in Switzerland, functioning as a critical safety point in a heavily trafficked but dangerous alpine corridor. Reaching Refuge du Goûter requires crossing the Grand Couloir, a narrow and unstable corridor on the Mont Blanc ascent route, where rockfalls occur frequently and without warning. This refuge sits at 3,835 meters above sea level on the main route to the summit of Mont Blanc, making it the highest staffed mountain hut in France. The structure was designed specifically for extreme altitude, with a focus on stability, energy efficiency, and resistance to harsh mountain weather. In this section of the Alps, wind speeds can reach up to 300 kilometers per hour, placing continuous stress on the building and surrounding terrain. Inside, the refuge accommodates around 120 climbers in tightly organized sleeping areas and communal spaces. The layout is functional, prioritizing capacity and safety over comfort, as most visitors stay only briefly before continuing their ascent or descent. Refuge du Gouter is one of the most important shelters on the Mont Blanc route, used by thousands of climbers each year. Our journey now returns to Antarctica, where people live and work on a floating ice shelf that is constantly moving and capable of developing massive fractures without warning. Halley 6 Research Station operates on the Brunt Ice Shelf along the Weddell Sea coast. Against the vast Antarctic landscape, the station's 8 connected modules appear small and isolated, surrounded by nothing but ice stretching to the horizon. The facility supports a small community of scientists, engineers, doctors, technicians, cooks, and operational staff. Their work focuses on climate research, glaciology, sea level monitoring, atmospheric science, and space weather observations. Daily life requires careful planning, resource management, and constant adaptation to one of the harshest environments on Earth. Halley holds a significant place in scientific history. Data collected by researchers at the station contributed to the discovery of the Antarctic ozone hole in 1985, a finding that transformed global understanding of atmospheric change and environmental protection. Anyway, the shelf beneath the station slowly shifts over time, creating long-term engineering and safety challenges. Since 2017, concerns about expanding ice fractures have prevented winter operations at the station. Even so, Halley remains one of the most important scientific outposts in Antarctica, continuing to support research in a region where the environment itself is constantly changing. We have now reached the end of our journey through some of the world's most isolated and extraordinary places. Despite the risks and harsh conditions, people continue to live, work, pray, explore, and conduct research in places that seem almost impossible to inhabit. These locations remind us that human determination can adapt to environments far beyond what most people experience in everyday life. If this journey helped you discover a new side of our world, be sure to subscribe and join us for more explorations of remarkable places and stories. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next adventure.